Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are just now starting. We are bringing our attendees online as I speak. So if you give us just a few moments, we'll be sure that we get everybody online and ready to join us as soon as possible. For those of you who are new to MHDC's webinars, first I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. Secondly, as you'll see on your screen, we have the live tweeting if you wish to use social media during the course of the presentation. We also have the Twitter handles for our guest, Ruby Raley, as well as for her company, Axway, and those that are of relevance to the Massachusetts Health Data Consortium. As I said, I'm Denny Brennan. I'm the Executive Director of the Health Data Consortium, and I am really pleased to welcome Ruby Raley to join us today. Ruby has a background in technology and healthcare, and as such, she brings a unique, informed, and seasoned perspective to just how difficult it is to manage technology in healthcare, in the healthcare setting, at a time of tremendous change and disruption. Ruby started as a programmer and moved into a CIO role before moving into healthcare and life sciences, where she's held a variety of customer-facing roles. Ruby also has significant supply chain experience, including a stint at Cardinal Health, and a strong background working with both payers and providers. Currently, Ruby applies this unique experience and expertise to help customers solve problems and reduce costs using the platform that Axway provides for content collaboration and healthcare solutions. With that, I want to provide first and foremost a couple of rules of order before we get started. Please type your questions into the Q&A box, and we will follow those questions during the course of the presentation, and we will identify some times during the presentation to ask those questions for you. Also, we will be muting everyone throughout the presentation so that we can proceed without some of the background noise that constitutes our daily lives and which we're increasingly used to as we do these webinars. But we appreciate that you keep your microphones on mute and use the Q&A for any questions that you have. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome Ruby Raley. Ruby, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to MHDC's webinar series.
Thank you as well, Denny, and the whole Massachusetts Health Data Consortium team. You guys have made me feel very welcome, and I much appreciate it. Bear with me, folks, while I get my deck up. There we go. So, thanks, Denny, for that really nice introduction. One of the things that I was going to reflect on a bit later in the deck, but I think I'll bring it up now, was when I was a CIO, I used to say to my CEO and other colleagues, it doesn't matter what I decide today. In a year and a half, you'll tell me I was wrong. And you may very well be right, because technology is changing so fast. And so, it's really hard to sit in the decision seat, whether your title is CIO, VP, CTO, enterprise architect, whatever it is, director, senior director. It's tough because you only have so much information available, and there's so much coming at you, and things are changing. So I hope that with this presentation, I can leave you with some food for thought. I can leave you with some ideas. I don't believe some of these will be new to you. I know many of you are very experienced people, but hopefully the thinking about it together will help you find some path that helps you, get the justification you need for a new project, get the approach you need for a new project, or or even just have a great conversation around a table or a Zoom meeting with your colleagues. So I really encourage you to ask questions. This is going to be much better if you communicate with Denny as he suggested, and that we can actually have this virtual conversation, this virtual meeting of the minds together. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to get started. So kind of just landing a little bit, I think that back in the day, we used to say better, faster, cheaper. And then our project managers would say to us, well, you can have 2 of the 3. And I'm here today to tell you that we almost have to have all 3. We have to have better, we have to have faster, we have to have cheaper. And it's not trivial. It's not a phone it in thing. And in healthcare, we have to have all of that with compliance. So we're effectively gated by all of our past and how all of that works together to the future. And we have to do more with less. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got here, what's coming at us, and how we might actually think about the problem differently, which hopefully is where you'll get some takeaway to take home with you. So I spent some time and I built this word cloud myself, and I shocked myself. I just sat down and I just started typing. And there's over 100 items in here. I think I ended at 140 when I quit. And I know I missed things. And if anyone's interested, I can give you the link for this, which is interactive, and the words will pop. It's phenomenal. And this is just really in the last 15 years, maybe 20 if you want to go back to the roots of HIPAA. It's amazing. Almost every single one of these is a compliance-driven thought. Some of them have come up, like hospital at home might be newer and less compliance-driven, but like most of these have a base and something you had to do. Like when you look at this, these were not optional things. You were doing it because you were mandated to. So it's amazing to think how successful we've been to navigate all of this change and all of these programs, but it's getting harder. So, I always like to validate my thinking, and I happen to follow Bob Evans. And so and he sent this out just the other week. I mean, it's very fresh. So I was finishing up this presentation when I saw this come in, and it was just summarizes my point of view perfectly, is that CIOs are plagued by this problem of they can't move aggressively to help their business partners, whether they're clinicians or administrators or even in pharma, potentially product managers or others, because they have no headroom left in their budget. Bob is saying 85% of their IT budgets are stuck on internal operations and maintenance. I don't know if that's the case, but I certainly know that it's above 50%. And you could easily say from personal experience, it feels like 70%. So when you're working with your budgetary process and your colleagues, because almost all of us in IT, our budget is funded by the business. We really don't have our own cost center anymore. We have to go fight through a portfolio process to get the money approved. We have to go through a budgeting process. Everyone agrees, oh yeah, IT needs this money, but then they're all annoyed because you have to say no to their new project they want because you're trying to upgrade med devices, you're trying to upgrade monitors, you're trying to patch an existing legacy system, you're trying to shore up a security problem. You don't have any room, and you struggle to tackle the new truly engaging things because of all of the smart things you did in the past. They now hold you back. And another way to look at this, our our CTO at Axway, Vince, uses this diagram. I didn't fully change it over from supply chain to healthcare, but I tried to make it a bit more healthcare oriented. He talks about your tech stack being a melting iceberg, and that and there is a link for this quote that tech debt principal is 40%. The interest I didn't count of your total IT cost. And there's an average of 10 to 15 medical devices per bed now that you have to maintain. You have to patch, you have to monitor, you have to have on the network because many of them are wireless now. And you've got nurses, you've got to continually retrain on the process. You're trying to talk to the vendor about getting the support you need, and not all of them are even yours. Some of them are probably loaners. And so you're trying to do asset management on it. So whether you're at this granular device level or whether you're at the CIO level fighting for that budgetary dollar, you have a problem. And in healthcare, it's worse because we've got all these cyber attacks going on. We've got supply chain issues. We've got challenges that we've never had before. Healthcare has been a very stable industry. We've always had shortages with nurses or clinicians, but we had traveling nurses. We had, temp people. But now we have people who don't want to work because of their concern or because of your policy or because it just doesn't seem worth it anymore. And you have burnout. Unbelievably, I have a dear friend who works in a hospital in the IT side in Connecticut, and he sends me notes on LinkedIn. It's the wild, wild west again. It's like we're barely treading water. We're just managing. There's no room to breathe in these situations we've experienced in the last couple of years. And as we'll dig in deeper in this presentation, our friends in HHS, CMS, ONC have put this new open API mandate on us. And this mandate is game changing. It's important. It's not something you can just phone in. We already see this with our conversations with health plans and providers. And our typical viewpoint in the provider world is, I have Epic, I have Cerner, they'll get to it, I'll just use theirs. But there's some reasons why that's not necessarily the right approach for you in today's world and into the future. And we'll dig into that as well. But I think you can agree with me that you've got a challenge right now to find the resources, money, internal team members, vendor partners to get it done for your clinician colleagues.
Ruby, a couple of questions. When you describe technical debt, are you describing the embedded cost of supporting existing technical infrastructure? What is the specific definition of technical debt?
There's a lot. I discovered doing the research for this that there's more than one definition. The definition I'm using in this has to do with once a project or a device of any sort is installed, you have to maintain it. So you have to pay the vendor, you have to pay support, and your team has to support that. So every time you have a successful implementation, you're effectively parking part of your budget to support that device or that piece of software or that cloud implementation, and you're parking some portion of your team's mind share to take care of that. Even if you outsource it to a vendor with managed services, you still have someone on your team who's responsible for making sure that vendor's doing right. So I put all of that together. So the OS, the patching, the maintenance, the support, the subscription services, and your own resources that have to be devoted to taking care of that so that it works effectively in your world. And what happened to all of us, again, that's part of my point about whatever decision I make now will be wrong in a year and a half, is we all have more than one tech solution for a problem. So in Axway's core roots, we do a lot of file movement. So we're well known for moving files securely. Almost every one of our customers has more than one solution for this. So when you're on the buyer's side, I call it the opposite side of the table from me now, and I'm talking to you, you probably already have what I'm trying to sell you. You have 2 and 3, sometimes 4 and 5 of the same thing because of very good decisions you made in the past that added up to buying more than one of something. I do have some customers who are super strong at shared services who've done everything in their power to consolidate everything under one platform, one solution, one team. But even they are now looking at digital transformation and challenging themselves. Should I move this process to the cloud? Is there a newer solution set here that would meet my current needs better? So I think wherever you are, you've got more than one of everything, or you're in a position of deciding whether you need to change what you have.
Great, thank you.
I threw these questions up, and I'm not gonna go through them, but I threw them up as thought provoking. Maybe if you're having this conversation with your leadership, this might help them walk into the thinking that I'm going to share with you as we go through. I think all of us agree we've got too darn many compliance projects running right now. And when I look at the interoperability rule, when I look at the transparency and coverage, when I look at the No Surprises Act, thankfully, some of these dates were delayed, but some of this stuff isn't even mapped out well enough. You can start a project on it. Like the No Surprises Act has still quite a lot of definitional challenges. I would love to have a conversation about the advanced explanation of benefits, because I think that is a massive, massive challenge for us that we haven't even started yet. We've got all of these warnings as of last week in this, that the Russians are coming for our infrastructure, lock down everything, man the gates. So, and then we had this unbelievable log4j problem at Christmas time. Our support team, thought they were on vacation. Most of them had to come back, right? Because every single customer we had was, where's my patch? What are you doing? I need this yesterday. And the problem was, it wasn't like a simple, here's the question, here's the answer. It was evolving. Every day, it seemed like more came out about what was impacted, what had to be recompiled, what could be patched, what couldn't be patched. It's a massive, and at the worst time of the year where you're trying to freeze your systems for year end and you're having to patch your most critical things. I think every CIO has a project backlog. I suspect it's months, if not years. And just keeping up with your hardware is enough of a challenge. And I also think from a CIO standpoint, there's so many changes coming that our tech staff may not even have the right skill sets. So we've got other things, and what that means, we have to say no to something. And how often do we have to go to the board for special funding? Like, the problem is so big, it doesn't even fit in our agenda. So our bosses tell us, well, we'll have to go to the board and get special approval for this. And so how many times have you been in front of the board? Like, are you becoming a regular feature on their agenda? I think it's frightening for some of us in our experience to think, the only time they see me is when I'm explaining why I didn't get something done, or why I need more money to get something done. Like, where are my successes? It's wearing, it's emotionally and mentally wearing all of us down. So let's dig in a bit to, if we all agree that we have these problems, let's dig into, does Ruby have an idea that might help me get out of this mess? So let's see, and challenge me, guys. So don't just let me say something you disagree with.
We will. I assure you.
Thank you, Denny. So, my hypothesis here is that we're all going through transformation, and yes, healthcare does tend to be slower than some of the other industries, and that's for good reason because lives are at stake. So I'm happy that we don't just go around grabbing the latest and greatest thing and shoving it in there. But it's coming for us now. More and more our customers are saying, I'm willing to go to the cloud. Whereas a couple of years ago, they said, no way, over my dead body. Now they're saying, yep, I'll do it. So we know transformation is coming. And we know from what I was just stating that we're going to need to clear some portfolio room to invest in our tech landscape and modernize it. And what some of my hypothesis is that self-service and automation can help you deliver that improved experience that your business partner or clinical team is looking for at a reduced cost. And so to get there, we got to take two sides of it. So one side is efficiency. So I know I talked a lot about tech debt, but many of us have something, whether it was handcrafted or modified, that works extremely well for our business. Maybe it's, your administrative system, you've got it tuned, you've got it configured, you've got your business policies put in. So admissions might be something that is just really well done for you, even though someone else might look at it and say it's old and needs to be replaced. You say, no, this is what I want. I could not actually recreate this. So how do you repurpose it? How do you modernize it or renew it? Could you bolt APIs onto it? Can you wrap APIs around it? Can you move it to the cloud and have it still be as effective, but reduce its run rate cost? So what resource competencies do you have? Do you have the right ones? Do you have an aging tech force where maybe you now need to say, for the first time ever, I'm going to engage the vendor to manage this. The vendor will do that log4j patch. I don't have the team to do that anymore. It's not my core competency. I want to focus my team on building hospital at home. I want to focus my team on building care collaboration, care follow-up, care plans. I can take some of this IT infrastructure management and give it to somebody else. So I think that's one of the first top level thinkings you have to do. But even if you just do that, if you look at what I said before, there's so much more coming, you'll just end right back up where you were. So you have to figure not only the efficiency, but you have to get more agility. And what I see over and over again in healthcare is 18-month projects. It's like we pull the team together, we get the project manager, we spend months assessing something, we spend months building it out, and then we spend months testing it before it goes into production. And just as often as not, we find something in production that we missed because our data wasn't good enough, because we couldn't anonymize the data well enough to test properly with it, or there was some complicated configuration. So we've got to find some way to go faster, to stop building handcrafted integrations, to be able to reuse and to be able to grab things. And it's not just my hypothesis, but it's many smarter people than I believe that low code and API first is the new thing we need to look into to get there. So what do I mean by low code and API first? So, I don't want to say how old I am, but Denny and I probably can track very closely with all of the things we've experienced in our tech career. But I can remember in the 90s, object-oriented programming, right? And all this stuff coming and how we had to do all of these object models and how we were going to do all this stuff, and how once we had this object built, all we were going to do is just grab the method for it and life was going to be perfection. And it didn't end up that way. And I do know that this feels the same, so one of the things is that APIs are not quite as laser focused on entities as objects were, but there's some commonalities. So if you live through that like I did, you're going to see some threads here that are similar. And so we've got to do it a little bit better. But the premise of low code is, and I'm not talking about the low code tools that you can buy, although I follow several other vendors because I love what they talk about, and I would encourage you to investigate if you haven't. But what low code does is it says that I'm going to develop more of a point and click kind of experience for my people, right? So I'll be able to look at a set of resources. Maybe they're, how do I connect to Epic? Or maybe they're, how do I connect to a partner like my pharmaceutical company that's delivering drugs, or my distributor who's bringing gloves and gowns in? So how do I just click, like grab a pre-built integration and use that, rather than having to go understand how to get through the firewall, how to get past the CISO's security review, right? I'm going to use what's already there, and that's going to reduce my time in security reviews. It's going to reduce my time fighting through the infrastructure to get outside the firewall to another team or another partner. And it's proven. Like, this is something that already exists. Somebody else has already used it. So I want to grab it. So that's kind of the premise of low code. And if you had these building blocks and you grab them, then you can build something much faster than sitting down with the proverbial blank sheet of paper and writing the code from scratch.
Ruby, do you see among the technologies that healthcare organizations use today more tools to enable those kind of low code implementations? In other words, instead of being black boxes with proprietary APIs or proprietary integrations, are more vendors moving to enable their customers to use, open APIs, low code solutions than you've seen in the past? Or are we still struggling with one app, one purpose, no reusability, no API first?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say it depends. Okay, so this is not meant. This whole presentation is not meant to be about Axway, but I have to use my experiences to answer the question. So Axway, I mentioned, is well known for its file movement technology. We put APIs around all of that. I will tell you that our customers still tell us that those APIs aren't packaged up quite well enough for them, and we're working to get there. So what I think is, yes, a lot of your internal technology infrastructure and your key platforms like your electronic record systems, your administrative systems, your CRM systems have some APIs on them. Maybe those APIs are simply a way to do headless operations. In other words, like a command line function exposed as an API. So what you end up with, and Denny, I wasn't going to introduce this, but I think this is important, is you end up needing to package it into an experience API. So what you can do then is take these core sets of APIs that are more and more available in Salesforce, and even in Epic and Cerner, who might be lagging, but certainly in CRMs and certainly in cloud vendors and your more a lot of your infrastructure people like we are, they've got those APIs. They might not be the API that you need, but you can package them into an experience API that delivers a service or a set of steps. So quit looking at the APIs solely as a laundry list of 1,000, and think about packaging those APIs into the work that you need to do. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that soon. And that's also where API first thinking comes. And we have someone called a catalyst who helps people with this. And what it is thinking about this not just from the bottom up, where I was talking about wrapping a minute ago, and Denny's asking about APIs. It's very easy to go grab something and slap an API on it. There are tools out there that'll do that even off your database. So maybe you've got a really great claims database and you want to provide an API to go find a a patient or a member, you want to find a partner, you want to pull some data out for analytics, it's pretty easy to go do an ODBC sort of view on it and expose it as an API. But it's that top-down thinking of the API as a product that helps you see that there's a gap between wrapping that legacy system or that new platform in an API and delivering the toolkit that people need. And I can use an example of onboarding a partner, which, you know, every industry that I work with has this problem. Okay, so I need to get a new partner connected. Okay, so first I got to get them registered. Then I got to show them how to exchange data with me. Then I got to test this data, you know, and then I have to promote them into production. And I'm going through all these things. That there's bunches of things that can be exposed as an API. But do we have we actually sat down and figured out what are the experiences of that? So in healthcare, when I register a new partner, I want them to read some of my policies and procedures and attest that they have. I want them to identify themselves so I can contact them. These are fair asks. You know, that's not information blocking to ask who's connecting with you. And then they might want to download some documentation, like all of us still have companion guides. All of us still have documentation about our interfaces. Maybe they want to download that. Then as they do that, then maybe you would grant them their identity, or in API speak a token, or you'd register them in your systems. And so then they get some way to start working with you. But you could imagine the need to package that up into a series of steps that could help them navigate the process better. And I think that's one of the things that's missing. It's missing in the interoperability rule, it's missing in our partner onboarding, and it's missing on how we think about APIs. And that's what that API first thinking of that API as a product, not just I added an API on top of something. So I'll be a little bit controversial. Some of my SI friends pitch this idea of an API factory. We're going to come in and we're going to slap APIs on all your stuff, and then you're going to be great. Well, I argue that's not going to do what you need. It may help you if you have a resource shortage. So I'm not trying to say it's a bad idea, but it doesn't identify the API experiences, the interactions that your partners and your internal constituencies, whether they're a developer or a clinician or someone else, needs. And that's why you've got to do more than just slap APIs on things. You've got to understand what the workflow, what the experience is, and put that together in an organized way. And that then will let you open things up efficiently and do that. And the bottom part here, to just wrap, is there's no way that any of this stuff comes out of the box perfection. You know, this is again where Denny and I can say we've been there, done that. You know, first generations, anything don't fit, usually have some sort of disappointment in them. So one of the things that agile thinking teaches us is we need to get the first thing out there, get the feedback, and iterate it, right? And go through that cycle to mature it faster, and not to just throw it out there in production and walk and disband the team. So I really encourage you to think about that as you're adopting this. And again, I will say that this is not just Ruby thinking. Gartner is telling everyone, and you'll see the words coming up soon, about citizen integrators and citizen developers and composable ecosystems. So this is coming. Your senior leadership is going to be reading these pitches from Gartner and talking about them. So this is not just, you know, a vendor speak. This is industry moving in this direction towards the low code API first type thinking.
Terrific. We have a couple of great questions.
Okay,
I'd like to, and I know we want to be moving at the pace we need to move, but Joe Cody asks a very good question. And he says, how can we work to democratize digital health development processes and widen the circle of people and patients who are involved? You know, due to the complex technical nature of technology and regulation in healthcare, Jody's beginning to feel like only the super technical, well-funded or entrenched actors, sometimes you have to be all three, are able to enter this space, thus limiting the number of voices at the table and the development of ideas that could have merit and enable change. You mentioned low code and open APIs as ways to increase agility and measure results. But how many are external facing rather than internal? That's a big question.
That's a fabulous question.
It's a
Yeah.
fabulous question. I agree.
I think there's like 5 or 6 threads on there, all of them worthy of their own webinar. So let's see what I can do quickly, and maybe Denny would agree to reconvene this group at a future date if there's enough of these types of conversations.
Well, he asked it of both of us. Ruby. So maybe we have to figure out how to pull a group together and begin to think about doing this.
I would love to get deeper. I think that's one of the challenges we all face is this surface level world we live in. Social media is a surface level thing. What's happening with everything moving so quickly, and with COVID keeping us from being in a room together, this is the kind of thing that when I first attended a Mass Health Data Consortium meeting, we had kind of like this set of tables in a square with whiteboards around us, and we could go to the whiteboard, we could talk with each other, we could sidebar over the coffee. I mean, we're missing all of that now, so maybe we can recreate it. But back to the question. So it is a challenge, and I have a couple of smaller accounts that I'm working with. And I would say that for the smaller accounts, this is even more important because there is no way they can afford the interoperability rule, the price transparency rule, and the No Surprises Act if they can't reuse something. They do not have the team to park for 5 years to build this out. It's not possible. And they don't even know how many of their partners, their provider partners, and their members have any interest in getting this data out. So it's a very smart question, a very wise question. What I would say is that we start with the things that are most risky and challenging, not with the easiest. So what I see so much is we're starting with the easiest. What do I mean by risky, most challenges? Opening our front door to people we don't know. So in healthcare, the interoperability rule is telling us that for the first time in my understanding of healthcare, we have to allow somebody that has no contractual relationship with us, that is not covered by HIPAA, to come in and get data out of our system at will. And if we say no to them, we're bad people and we're information blockers and evil, right? And we're going to have a penalty if we say no. So if we can control that front door of how someone engages with us, how do they register? How do they discover something? How do they download it? How do they get promoted to production? That is going to game change so many things. And it actually is something I dig into a little bit in the next slides. So I think it is very much peeling the onion, Jody. It is not trivial by any means. And if you don't do this at the top, this is like change management fundamentals. Your leadership has to be bought in, and people have to realize this is going to be a journey. There's no switch that I can say if you just do A, wonderfulness happens. It's not that trivial. It never is in technology, and we all know that. That's a very general question. Answer to that very thoughtful question. And I apologize that I didn't dig deeper.
Well, we don't have time to do that today, but Jody, this is a great question. It's at the heart of what MHDC is about in many respects. And we're going to be following up on this after today's event and figuring out what we can do collaboratively.
And hopefully some of my subsequent slides are going to help us. And
absolutely.
So I'm going to dig into a little bit of this idea about customer service as a lever for automation that could actually drive some efficiency and deliver that aha moment that your business partners and your clinicians want. And so right now in healthcare, we have multiple digital channels coming up. So let me just take that small mid-sized health plan. Even the mid-sized health plan has a call center. They're answering questions from their members. They're talking to the providers. They're delivering status on claims. They're delivering status on processes. They're telling people how to get eligibility questions answered. They are on the phone all day long. High expectations. We're all, even though we're healthcare, we are all dealing with more competition. We're dealing with consumers like millennials and the digital natives who want a mobile app, who don't want to talk to a person. They don't, it's like my kids, they don't even use voicemail. They like think voicemail is idiotic. So they text everything like, and I have to admit that until recently, my 32-year-old daughter did not even have a bank account. She did everything on her phone, right? It's like, it's amazing. The phone is your banking unit, I should say she had a bank account, but she didn't have checks. She couldn't write a check. At one point when she was younger, she actually asked me how to write a check, right? So those of us who've been around go like, whoa, like this is like so different. And then we have third-party intermediaries, healthcare. If you read the VC papers, healthcare is the best place to do a startup right now. There's VC money coming in. There's the big guys, the big cloud guys want to provide healthcare services. We've got more and more third parties coming to the table. These people may or may not have the right answer. I'm not trying to say that, but more and more we're buying from them and adding it to our platform. So what we have is a set of platforms where information flows unevenly across them. And we have our call center people, our clinicians and administrators on the front line, and our members and patients who are saying, tell me what the current status of something is. So it's here. So what Gartner is saying, and I think this is really powerful, is we've been thinking about exceeding customer expectations just to avoid losing the customer. So customer loyalty scores and things like that, which we use at Axway too, are more to help prevent that patient from going somewhere else. And by the way, stars ratings, have that as well. We're measuring how a patient or a member's experience happened. If we think about it though, what they care about is the effort the customer needs to put in to solve their problems quickly and easily. And I argue that the word customer can be replaced by any human. If you lead a bunch of developers, the developer does not want to go to the change control board and make his case. The developer does not want to go to a review session. He wants to code. He wants to grab something code and he wants to send his request off and do it all programmatically. Now, I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you can easily see that. And your partners, they want to connect with you. They don't want to be stuck in a 3-month project management session with meetings every week. So more and more, everyone you're talking to wants to solve the problem. And what we focused on was like, did you like my agent, right? Not did you get all your work done? So we need to empower people. We need to make it easy, little effort, make it fast. And we can do that by adopting automation tools that automate approval cycles. Many of us already have ticketing systems. Some of them are modern like ServiceNow and others. ServiceNow is building APIs like you would not believe and is opening up a possibility for you to like grab those, create a ticket on the fly, pass those off, even get human approvals pulled back in and navigate a complex approval cycle. That gives you that ability to deliver self-service experiences. So, one of my partners, I'm not going to name names because it could sound like a advertisement. She's trying to connect because of the interoperability rule. She tells stories about it took her weeks to find a human who could answer the question she needs to understand how to use the patient access Fire API. Why didn't they have a question button? Why didn't they have documentation? Why wasn't there a request to move to production button on their portal? So you can see, if you think about the experience, API first, product thinking, Okay, first I have to register this person. So what are all the steps in my registration process? Are there human approval cycle steps? Okay, how do I automate that? How do I get that human to get something in Teams or your email that says approve this, get it back in programmatically and cause the next step to occur without some human having to manually orchestrate a set of steps? How do I make sure that everyone knows the status of something at the same time? Everyone wants to know process status. I want to know where my claim is. I want to know, you know, what you're going to pay me on that claim. I want to know what action I have to take next to get this to move forward. Like all of these things are things that we can automate and expose in a portal, allow people to interact with us, and then programmatically, our self-service automation, words to use the current words in the market, allow us to do that without making them wait for a human. I think this is one of the things, because I just said we all have a staff shortage. So if we can take some of the humans out of the mix, then we don't have to have anyone monitoring queues. So, I remember when the whatever you want to call it, marketplaces, the public exchanges came on board, or the state exchanges, the whole enrollment process was so poorly defined that so many of us had a team of 5 to 10 people who, when they got that feed from the exchange, had to sit down, open it up, manually assess it, right? Figure out what to do, go look up to see if the person was already in the system, whether this was an ad update change or whatever it was, and take action on it, and how it cost money for us to participate in that exchange. Resources, time, energy, broken processes, and who got blamed? The consumer blamed us. They didn't blame the exchange for being poorly written. They blamed us. They said, oh, you should know I paid you already, or you should know this because I gave this information on the portal. And so we were failing. And that's because of this same thing, right? How do you automate the experience? How do you make all this roll? How do you make sure everyone has all the status messages at the same time so that information is flowing evenly, which will help take some of the stress out of all of our conversations? So that's one part of it. So now, that if you agree with me, you could get some efficiency through self-service and automation that would have the, let me go back, that would have the positive benefit of improving the customer satisfaction, the partner satisfaction, the developer satisfaction, employee engagement in your own organization. But that's not enough. So we have to quit doing things as projects. And that's where I think agility comes in. So bear with me, I have a little thought problem here. This ties to the interoperability rule and price transparency / no surprises act. And it is oversimplified. I know it is, but let's imagine that we have a patient access FHIR API. We have a provider FHIR API, and we have the payer to payer. So fundamentally, they're all moving patient or member data. This one, the patient access FHIR API, only wants one patient member set of data. The provider access may well want 1 to N of these, or even only one. The payer to payer is often going to be a member changed, the member wants portability of their data, so it's 1. So if we think about it, this is a fundamental building block that will check off 3 of these compliance projects. So if you built that one well, or you added some experience APIs in here to do the security or the checking or to bundle what you needed to bundle, you could complete these 3 items with so much less work. Then we think about, so we already have this one in place and we already have provider directory going. So now we've got to do this whole, how much is something going to cost me piece of work, whether it's in price transparency or in the No Surprises Act. So we're going to need prior auth, which we're all still working on, trying to get that moved over to FHIR. And we've got a lot of conversations, a lot of hard people working on this, smart people. So you think about this. So I've got a mistake here, but you could think about one of these being the pricing information. So I needed to expose my prices. I needed to expose eligibility. So you can now think about, I could actually get to building a pricing service by using my provider directory, my prior auth, my pricing information, and all of this to put something together. So when we start thinking about this design first or API first thinking helps us think about, what am I going to have to do? And what are the component and building blocks of it? And how might I deliver something that offers in one API or a set of orchestrated APIs, a completed work stream or a completed experience. And if we plan for that future, if we built this and this and this with the mindset that I'm going to reuse it for this and the price transparency and the No Surprises Act, then I'd be starting that process of giving myself a set of building blocks. And the black boxes that APIs bring to us will isolate the impact of change. So if I did have to change something in here because of UCSDI, I think I got that right. I always transpose 2 of those letters. As that comes online, I have to share more, then I could use versioning of my APIs. I could expand more, and then I could still support my partners that are using the old version while I deliver the new one. So I get this virtuous cycle going, right? And then my low code tools can find all these APIs and people can start putting them together in new ways. So now I have self-service and automation, freeing up my internal developers and my leadership to go do something else, delivering better experiences, making people happy, right? Now I've got this idea of building blocks coming together where I'm thinking about things not just as this compliance project, but I'm thinking about, how might I want to use this in the future? How might I put this together in a creative way? And now I begin to see that I can get some agility and some ability to get to what Gardner calls is the composable ecosystem. And what I think in healthcare, we have to have the composable compliance approach, because my argument to all of you is, if you take every API that's in the CMS list, the FHIR APIs, and you build them as a project without any thinking other than, I just got to do this, I'm going to get the implementation guide, I'm going to go look at DaVinci or whoever, I'm going to grab what I can, I'm going to build it, you're going to end up rebuilding the same thing multiple times. And so I can hypothesize that in 5 years, our future in healthcare could be powered by APIs. Prior auth is going to be an API. The payer coverage decision support, that's an API that's listed in the CMS stuff. Formulary and drug pricing, APIs. Provider directory, already required. Price and contract, machine readable. Well, it's only a small step to put an API on top of a machine readable file. All of you probably already have health savings accounts balances that you expose on your site. That's probably already API enabled. So think about this emerging set of APIs that are coming together. And in 2025, if all that happened, would you then be able to retire your EDI? Think about it. Maybe a lot of it, maybe not your drug purchasing, your classic material purchasing things, but wouldn't providers rather use eligibility and prior auth and claim status and everything else through an API that they could then put into a portal that helps their revenue cycle management people or their clinicians get the answer better? Or you could expose as a portal that you built out so that your providers could say, oh, I'm a clinician, I want to interact with the Blue Cross Blue Shield in my state. What are the things I usually ask them by phone calls? The status of this, eligibility for that, patient records for vaccination or something else, medication records maybe, as we started thinking, all that could be available for that clinician to choose from. And it could look like a portal to the clinician. Behind the scenes, it could be APIs that you exposed or that hospital exposed. And the same thing If you move over to revenue cycle management, these people call you constantly if you're a plan, asking you the status on these claims, right? So how much could you save if you could get them convinced to use a modern portal that had the latest information that was exactly the same information they're going to get from your call center? So now maybe you begin to get that. And then you could take some of that same base data and offer it to your member. And maybe for your member, you want to have a guided experience. So then you have the ability to drop into a chat box to explain something, or you've got the ability to download some documentation, or you've got some side-by-side explanation of what this means. So you can teach people. So now maybe you have competitive advantage. Maybe you're easier to do business with than anyone else, especially for the digital natives. Maybe they would rather do business with you because they can sit on their phone and get their questions answered. And then maybe you might even decide to use these price transparency rules to gather data about what other people are charging in your region for something and use that to set your prices. So maybe this isn't just a compliance project. Maybe it's changing the game for how you attract people to your hospital or your health plan, and how you use the publicly available data to ensure that you've set your prices so you can make the most money and deliver the best value for your consumers, I'll just say, to make it easy. So I think there's this potential, and we can say no to it or we can say yes to it. But you can see self-service and automation and this agility of building blocks and the regulatory path that's we've been put on are all kind of converging to a point where we could say we need to take a different approach, and we can actually get some really good value by doing that. And so, I bring back a little bit of compliance, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but we have to do some of this anyway, because the regulatory things say that we have to register people using OpenID and OAuth. So here's your opportunity to rebuild your whole authentication, your whole identity management system. We have to orchestrate some complex authentication, consent, and approval cycles. So here's your ability to build out self-service. We have to record log files. We have to record change records. So why don't we do that with APIs? And if we did that, then we might be able to manage the cost of compliance. We could encourage reuse. We could actually navigate all of this much more effectively, and we could deliver brilliant experiences. And in the US, there's no other market that I know of that has this open API thing mandated. My Axway is very interested in open banking, which is being mandated at countries around the world, that allows you to have portability of your financial experience from one bank to the other, and the consumer is in charge of that. In the US, there aren't any mandates for open banking, but we kind of have a mandate for open healthcare. So it's very interesting what's happening. And so I would just end on, we can build a better future by thinking of efficiency as a flywheel. Those of you in startup mode, I know you often talk about flywheels and virtuous cycles and so forth. So I think there's this potential to use efficiency, which decomposes into self-service and automation, to therefore reduce labor, to deliver unified experiences to people that allow them to complete a task automatically. And we add some building blocks with APIs into that, then we can expose these things. We can do more automation, more self-service, and we can actually begin to get to that composable ecosystem idea that Gartner's on top of, where a citizen developer or a much less skilled developer can sit, point and click and choose, and connect something that didn't exist before. And think how powerful that would have been during COVID, when we had to go to a parking lot to do testing if we could have just constructed something that kept all of our records up to date, that didn't rely on paper, that allowed people to sit in their car, sign up as they were driving up to there, have the clinicians sit there, click on their phone, track of it, and all the records are updated. People can download their record later that they were there, they had the negative test, and then they could actually export that test and import it somewhere else. So then we had portability. Like, how much labor would that have saved? How much stress would that have saved? And again, I won't go through all of these things, but I leave these kind of decomposed ideas as things that I think you need to begin to start to do to be able to get to agility, efficiency, and compliance.
Brilliant. We have a number of questions, Ruby, and I know we have about 4 minutes left, so we're going to do this as efficiently as we can.
Okay.
Question number one, what do you think of the idea of an API gateway, like a clearinghouse in the EDI world, but used as a hub and spoke organizer of access to trading partners?
You know, for API vendors like Axway, because we are an API vendor, all of us have gateways. The cloud guys, all the big cloud guys have API gateways. The idea of it is fabulous. And I definitely think that there's potential either for disruptors or for us to do it ourselves. But be careful of using that word API gateway, because it's already in use in industry as a lower level idea of just a piece of technology that receives the request and routes it, and then takes the response and routes it back. So just be careful, but conceptually, yes, absolutely.
Sorry about my time constraint. We do have more time than I realized. I thought we were on an hour time frame. So we still have about 29 minutes left or so. Second question, how do you encourage folks to keep on top of technical debt when there is so much new stuff everyone has to or wants to do, and the new stuff always gets higher priority?
That's true. You know, I guess it's a long time ago now. So let me share some of my Cardinal Health experience. You know, I was supporting the warehouses, and that was a mission for me, because when Cardinal Health can't replenish a provider that's had a natural disaster, like our friends in the Southeast with the hurricanes during that time frame, they can't serve their communities. People's health are at risk. You know, I won't over exaggerate, but dangerous things can happen. So it's a mission. And we had neglected refreshing the barcode scanners because exactly what you said, Denny, there were other things that everyone, especially in leadership, considered more important. But to me, the experience of that shift guy in the warehouse, when he couldn't find a scanner that worked and he hid one that worked in his locker so he could do his job the next day, I latched onto that experience and I pushed that value through the organization. We got every single warehouse refreshed. Everyone lined up with me. We have to take these tech problems and put a human face on them. And we have to be able to quantify the human cost of neglecting these things. And you could do the same thing probably with med devices in your hospital and your nurses' frustrations with the devices that don't work and that get cycled around, because once they find the one they do, they push the other one down the hall and someone else gets stuck with it. There are costs to neglecting these problems. It's just that as leaders, when we sit on the Zoom calls, we don't see it anymore. We've got to humanize the problem. That's my belief. There's plenty of other ways to solve it as well. You can assign a financial cost to it.
Well, I think board members, those ones that might cringe when the CIO shows up at the meeting, might be more responsive to the requests those individuals have when they do put a human face to and a human need, and how humans adapt to a problem that they're trying to solve. So I think that's a great answer.
Yeah, I'll just say that this is our biggest gap in healthcare when it comes to the CISO and the tech community, is our ability to quantify risk and experience into some sort of numerical project funding request is gating all of us from doing good things. It's a big problem. I've spent a lot of time noodling it. I don't claim to have the answer, but it hurts all of us that we don't have the skill that we need.
Well, we're asking organizations that have historically not had the need to be as effective and as responsive to customers as the pandemic has required us to be, as just the complexity of healthcare increasingly requires us to be. So I think those are excellent points. A next question we have is, what about microservices as a way to componentize and reuse APIs?
Yes, I try to avoid being super technical in these conversations. So
Well, I appreciate that, because microservices has always sent me into searching ruthlessly over the internet to find out what exactly it means.
yeah, you could bring in the word containers. You could bring, as for scalability and deployment ease, microservices. There's lots of different pieces here. The point of view I want to leave you with is that it's still all of the above. If you just have the best tech stack that ever lived and you don't deliver better experiences to your consumers, whether they're employees or partners or patients, if you don't make it easier for people to work with you, right? Again, whether that's the developer or anyone else, you're missing part of the problem. So there's lots of ways you can build the composable ecosystem. There's lots of things that can be exposed with APIs. You have to have that API first design thinking to figure out how to use all those things in ways that will make a difference.
Within the organization, we have the problem of people having to do things they don't want to do in order to help others do what they have to do. For example, the documentation you just stressed requires developers to provide information or answer questions from tech writers, even though most don't like doing that. How does this componentization, this kind of internal service model, help developers and documentarians and others work more effectively internally?
Well, let me just say that I managed lots of developers in my career, and truer words are never spoken. The developers don't like to do documentation. And unfortunately, many of us just hired a bunch of tech writers and they get something thrown over the fence from the developer when it's done. So we know this doesn't work as well as it needs to. And we know there's plenty of vendors who claim they've solved the problem. The thing about APIs, though, is they are inspectable, just like XML is more inspectable than EDI to the layman, right? So, I have to remember how to do recursive loops if I want to understand an EDI structure, where with XML is very wordy, has tags in it. I can figure it out almost with just Notepad, although it's much nicer to have better visualization. So APIs are the same because you're exposing methods and you're trying to do this in such a way that it's self-documenting, and you're allowing the developer to try it. I mean, this is one of the big differences, right? So with an API portal, the developer can actually download the API and he can actually try the API and he can see how it responds. So he can kind of explore on his own. We have to put that documentation, though, even in the APIs, but hopefully it's less onerous than writing the 20 or 30 page companion guide that's explaining everything in text that then has to be maintained with a change control cycle on top of it. Whereas with the API, each of these methods and fields are kind of documented as it goes. So hopefully, if we think in the best possible terms, it becomes this big problem that we bolted on at the end gets divided into much smaller little bits that we can add as we go. I recognize that it's easier for me to say than for us to do. So I know this is going to be a challenge.
Currently, we see And we can't ignore the pandemic in this context, but when it comes to price transparency, when it comes to interoperability and information blocking, we're seeing in the provider community and possibly in some cases in the payer community, what I would best describe as sort of kind of a helplessness, an acquired sense of powerlessness about how do I do these things? How do I parse these different requirements? And what you've been describing is a method that many organizations can use. In your experience, do you see and is this discussion that we're having today something that provides the CIO at the health system that gleam in the eye, that light at the end of the tunnel? Because we see from our vantage point a lot of, from what it appears, this is just speculation on my part, but a reticence to do anything. Perhaps the regulations will go away, perhaps they will change, and the end result of this is not likely to be good. There's going to be a lot of non-compliance. When you talk to customers about this kind of, this onslaught, do you see this helping to open their eye, not open their eyes, but give them hope, give them a sense of possibilities rather than impossibilities?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say if I didn't believe in this, I wouldn't have devoted the hours I've devoted to this over the last 6 months, because this is something I've been working on for a while. I did have to expand it to make it fit an hour, because normally I don't have an hour to discuss this. So it's such a luxury to be able to go slower and actually build a better foundation for the idea. So I appreciate that greatly in this and the opportunity to do that. So, I believe I've been working on pharmaceutical regulations even longer than I have on health plan and provider. And some of you may know about the drug serialization regulations that started with e-pedigree. Do you know we've been kicking that can down the road for years? And we purposely, as an industry, did it because we didn't want to spend the money on compliance. Not in no circumstance did we ever look at this as anything but a cost of doing business. It was a sunk cost. We hated it. We minimized it. We hired lobbyists to delay it. We see the beginnings of this with the interoperability rule, and I validate your statement that many are thinking, if I just don't do anything, they're going to delay this compliance or enforcement again. I'll buy more time. And we've already seen this multiple situations in all of these interoperability rule, price transparency, and No Surprises Act. I believe there's going to be more. I think the advanced explanation of benefits is so difficult that it's going to be even delayed more because everyone's going to realize that. But it's game changing. It's creating a real-time conversation between 3 or more components of the healthcare delivery system that do not talk to each other at the same time: the patient, the clinician, and the plan. And I'm leaving out the drug, the pharmacy benefit managers, and the hospital contractors and all that complexity. But these 3 people never talk to each other together. Every conversation you have as a patient is only with your clinician or with their people trying to get money out of you from admissions or billing. The conversation you have with the plan are when you're, signing up in open enrollment, or when you're arguing with them over something you don't like. You don't talk to them the rest of the time. Maybe if you have a chronic disease, you have a care manager. Maybe you don't even talk to the care manager. Now we have a chance for all of us to talk to each other in near real time. This is game changing. We are going to have lots of people who want to delay it. My hypothesis is the people who look at this, and even if you only choose a small portion of the vision I laid out here, and who take action now, can use the extra time to do it right. Sadly, if we had stayed on the dates we had, most of us would have no choice but just to spin up a separate project team, do the best we could, and go forward, and then have a whole bunch of new tech debt that we have to then redo to get any real value out of. But with these delays, we've got the chance to pull back, think, look on the marketplace, see if we need more tools, see if we need more training, see if we need help to do this thinking, and do it. So if you think it's going to go away, I would challenge you to note that both Democratic-led regulators and Republican-led regulators all are doing the same thing. It's not going to go away because the cost of healthcare is going up. How many Bill Clinton speeches have you heard about how the cost of healthcare is actually hurting our GDP and how it's affecting the health of our whole country financially? I've listened to him, gosh, for more than 10 years make this speech. So it's not going to go away. If you don't want to take action very much, COVID is probably going to help you not take action. But why don't you look at it as an opportunity instead of as a cost?
I think that's well said. I think one of the things that the industry has not traditionally had to incorporate into their thinking, into their design, into their system strategy is that customers, whether they're members or patients, will have opportunities to vote with their feet. And engaging the healthcare enterprise, whether it's the health plan or the provider, is such an extraordinarily difficult effort that if one were to encounter a health plan and a provider who took down just half of those hurdles, that would move a huge number of patients and members to organizations where they can do what they're trying to do without the hurdles that are being put in place. And I think the impact of I don't like the term consumer as much, but the impact of the patient and the member being a part of the information, gathering, the information quality, the information use process is something these organizations haven't had to do for their entire existence. And now it's being foisted on them, and
Right.
Customers are going to insist on it.
Right. I do think it's going to take some time. I want to comment on that real briefly.
Sure.
So Denny, that's so well said. We need to realize in healthcare that the sickest members and patients are really controlling factors. That's where we lose money. We either have to take care of charity people, or our cost for the plan is not right because we had too many sick people on it. So we have this problem. And more, the problem is gated by social determinants of health and age. And what that means is folks like you and me have our older relatives calling us up, asking us to navigate the health system, which we cannot do because we don't have the time to take off from work and go get a folder full of paper and go through it and interpret it and call everyone up and get the right meaning and navigate all the eligibility and all these rules and go through all this. It's more and more falling on the healthy people to solve these problems for everyone else. And in the meantime, we're all losing money because those very sick people aren't getting the care they needed because they can't engage with us for whatever reason, or their family can't engage with us. And then we're hiring people to chase them down. So whether you think of it as a mission to take care of people, or you think of it as how to be more financially healthy, this problem is getting worse and we are going to have to solve it. We can solve it by bolting on more stuff, creating more tech debt, hiring more people to chase everybody down who's not doing it, or we can try to get people to want to work with us.
Thank you. What do you say to folks who see increased automation as a threat to their job rather than a way to make their job easier to do?
My dad and I used to have this fight when I was in high school, and he was a union guy. So and I was going into technology. It's an honorable fight. So I would say that if you're a tech person saying that, then wake up and look at the history of tech. All we've done is move problems from one set of hands to another, and we're going to keep doing it. So if you think that self-service and automation is putting you out of the job, then, you know, it's put lots of people out of jobs before, and it's going to continue to do that. If you're saying that because you're a call center person and you think you're going to be replaced by a chat box, well, guess what? I don't have a single major utility company that I can talk to a person anymore without fighting through like chat bots and defeating their call tree to get a person online. It's already happening. So I would say, yes, there's truth in the worry, there's truth in the statement, but when you're in the middle of massive change, it's better to think about opportunities and where you yourself want to be in the future and chart a course to that than to just sit and complain and try to block change from happening.
Well said. I mean, if you're part of, and it does presume that you're part of an organization that has done this successfully, and that more problems are coming up and more needs for people to continue to solve those problems arise. But we are seeing that. We are seeing that it is increasingly difficult, and sometimes we would like to have another person at the line, as you said, defeat the call tree. But also, increasingly, we're finding out that we can solve problems that we have with the organizations we interact with in our lives when they make it possible for us to solve that problem directly online. And being able to avoid that call tree, the punch a number for another menu of numbers that will lead you to another menu of numbers, is an interim step. I think increasingly we're going to find that as organizations get better at this, and we do see this with some organizations, that we actually get our problems solved when we try to solve them the first time around. So that's, I think, an excellent point that you raise. A question I have is, we are looking at a number of ways in which interoperability and information exchange can power better experiences for healthcare patients and members. And one of the real examples of this is in the prior authorization process. We've been working as a consortium with plans, providers, vendors to advance an automated prior authorization process that we would like to see move statewide. One of our hypotheses behind that is, not only do we want to reduce burden, but we also want to encourage putting in some of the pipelines, the infrastructure for FHIR and API-based exchange. Could you comment on that? If we can slay one problem, how do we reuse what we learn in that problem to solve it better, to solve other problems? We look at, if you can do prior author, as you point out, if you can do an advanced explanation of benefits, you can do just about anything. Could you talk about sort of, if you take a stake and you take a position to start in this API economy, that's going to be a path to helping organizations become better and more efficient and effective and agile at doing this going forward?
Prior auth is kind of fundamental. And, back when I was more focused on EDI, I spent a lot of time with CAQH. And, prior auth is the least automated message, if I remember right. I did not look at their study they published this year, so maybe it's changed a little bit, but compared to eligibility, claims status, claims processing, even electronic funds transfer, least automated thing we've got. So, it's smart to do it in FHIR, I think, rather than EDI. I always felt that prior auth for EDI was a pain in the butt because you needed to attach so much clinical documentation to it, right? And that was huge. And EDI doesn't like megabytes of clinical documentation moving on it. It's meant to be short, sweet, efficient, bogs everything down, causes the processes to break. So it never felt right that prior auth should be forced through the EDI thing. I even at one point had the picture of the snake swallowing the big thing and the lump moving through the body as an example of what was going to happen when we pushed clinical documentation through an EDI engine. So to me, it makes perfect sense to do this in FHIR, which is, you know, XML meant to be wordy, right? And you already have components of it available in that you have the ability to get FHIR resources for the patient records. So you can pull the clinical data. It's already right there in the same platform. And you begin to do this. And prior auth is so fundamental to digitizing our experiences, not just with the regulation, but period. Because without it, you're forcing people to call. Then you have to have the call center. Then so much of prior auth requires digital decision making. So then that falls over to a person once again. So it is going to be challenging for the smaller plans that maybe don't have their entire medical decision tree automated. But I would challenge that everything in tech is the Pareto rule. It's 80-20. If you can't do it all, don't try. Find the low-hanging fruit. Find the simple stuff, get that going, learn from it, and then tackle something that seems harder. Quit using, I used to say this, don't tell me about your 100-year flood problem. It's only going to happen once in 100 years, and I'll put people on it to solve that. Tell me what's causing you the problems day in, day out, that I can make it better for you. We get that done, then we'll see what's left. And, you know, there's a big part of my background that's tied into Lean and Six Sigma, and it's all about peeling the onion. You find out what's hurting you the most, people, process, technology. You try to fix some of that, and then all of a sudden this new problem is going to appear that was hidden by the old problem. And then you just apply that same technique and you go after that. And if you keep doing that, you build resilient systems. You build things that last. So we just have to be willing to put in the work to get to the destination. And it is work. It is a challenge. It's not, again, there's no magic wands in here.
That's a terrific place for us to close, because I hope none of us came into our webinar today looking for a magic wand, but maybe something that for dint of it, the results it produces could just as well be one. Ruby, Raley, Axway, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating and enlightening conversation. We live in a complex world, and as human beings, we need to deconstruct problems in order to solve them. And increasingly, we need to use these machines and these tools to make those solutions possible. And we know each other, we run into each other across the transom in various conferences and webinars happening around the country. We look forward to working with you in person as soon as that time comes up, and having that whiteboard and those tables. We still have that office with those tables arranged as if we had a meeting just yesterday. I want to thank everybody online for joining us today. This was a terrific presentation. We will have a copy of the presentation available, as well as the video of today's discussion in a few days. Give us 72 hours or so, and we'll be able to pull that together. You can find it on our website at www.mahealthdata.org. And again, lastly, Ruby, I want to thank you so much. Ruby, you have your contact information there. If folks have questions of Ruby that you'd like to send, you can send them to Ruby, but also we can also make Ruby's life a little easier if you send them to us. And we can then get them organized and send them directly to Ruby as one pack. So if you send those to webinar@mahealthdata.org, we'll pull those all together and we'll get those to Ruby in one fell swoop. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Again, Ruby, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights. I was a supply chain person too in a prior life. So I share some of the pain and happiness that went with that experience. And I look forward to our all working together in the future and going forward. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.